Looking good?
It looks like it's showing on our end that it's streaming live.
Yeah, I see it, Barb. We're all good now.
Looks good. Thanks, Brad. Okay, we're ready, Gloria. Still waiting for some people though.
Yep, we have Chris, Nikki, Julia, Ali. Okay, it looks like people are logging in, so let's go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. But first, see. Let's wait a few more minutes.
Yep.
And then Gloria, Barb can put up the.
Yeah, okay, there's.
When you're ready.
I was waiting for Dr. Jenkins. There he is. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, good.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. We are live on YouTube. And before we begin with our next agenda item, I want to welcome our new superintendent, Dr. Carlton Jenkins, to his first meeting this evening. Welcome, Carlton.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, ma'am.
Okay, let's move on. Additional purchase of ANET interim assessment licenses for ELA and elementary and middle schools for 2020, 2021. And I'll pass this over to
I'll take it, Gloria.
Yep.
Yeah, as you guys know, our district's been working on a comprehensive assessment plan. And you will remember hearing about it most recently last Monday at the instructional work group meeting. We have an immediate opportunity to purchase some materials that will allow us to implement some key assessment strategies. And you know how important that's going to be for us next year. So Lisa is going to share a little bit more about the information tonight and why we need to take action on this tonight. So Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Barb. I was just going to say, if you could drive the slide deck, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. So we just wanted to, before you had an opportunity to vote and to provide you with a little bit of information, to take a little time to understand how assessment, a high quality assessment system is an equity strategy for MMSD. Predominantly, people associate assessment with high stakes accountability. This, however, here is not our approach to assessment. Our approach with these two purchases that we're coming with you tonight calls for the use of assessment and data as an equity strategy to improve outcomes for our students. So when teachers are planning and looking at data from high quality assessments, then they can plan for classroom instruction with a consistently high bar in mind for all of their students, but particularly from the lens of what our marginalized students need the most. We see a comprehensive assessment system, and particularly the assessments tonight, as a key lever to ensure that all children are receiving high quality, grade level, and standards aligned instruction with access to high quality materials and resources, which include these assessments. So data will be used by these assessments to improve the learning cycle for students and to reinforce that cycle of great teaching that teachers use to reflect and adjust. Next slide, please. Thank you, Barb. So we're offering this slide that you have seen before as context for our assessment strategy as a reminder in 2021. We've been working diligently on our comprehensive assessment plan, which started back in 1819. It involved school leaders, student voice, central office leaders, MTI was part of the work. The group evaluated current assessments and provided recommendations. And the upshot of the recommendations, if you remember, was that we had a glut of evaluative assessments. We had too many that weren't used to inform teaching and learning. And we wanted to look for assessments that were more proximate to learning, closer to instruction. So we crafted an assessment vision, which is grounded in the notion that assessment is an equity strategy. Then the planning group, which had a vast array of voices involved, took the recommendations and created the multi-year plan, as you'll see. And this past year, we've worked on implementing Fastbridge for progress monitoring. We field tested it in the summer for replacing PALS and as a literacy screener in both English and Spanish. And we're currently engaging stakeholders in studying a replacement for MAP and looking at different interim assessments. So next slide, please. So more than ever now, as our students are looking at us to do something different in how we reopen schools in the fall, we need to be looking at getting different results that don't reinforce the current gaps that exist, and different results that will help us to lead children to learning and be engaged in safe and high standards and safe environments where they are learning and assessing what is being taught to the high standards that, that our state requires. This is our strategy for 2021. You've seen this before. There are, first of all, in the orange are the critical screeners for all and some students. Those are the temperature checks. Those are the little sort of checks to see what are additional challenges that might be necessary, what remediation and scaffolding might need to happen in order to meet the standards. The interim assessments that you see in green, that's what we'll be talking about tonight. If you have any questions about that, these are interim assessments for all students. Really helps teachers to understand how successful we are in teaching and learning and what standards need to be retaught or revisited to make up for missed learning. And then the bottom ones, you'll see those short cycle formatives that are very often done as observations and exit slips. Those are the short probes for students that teachers sometimes use to check for understanding on a very frequent level. Okay, I think that is it for sort of an overview and information about what we're coming to you with tonight, which is an expansion of the ANET assessments to all of our elementary and some of our middle schools. We actually worked with ANET to lower the cost of the assessments from $10,000 a school to $3,000 a school. If you remember, we're partnering with them. And ANET is also partnering with the state of Wisconsin to provide professional development around high quality reopening. So we have talked with the chiefs, Carletra and Tremaine, and they are very supportive about the use of these high quality assessments in ANET. And the reason for the early approval is to get all of the information loaded in the system and provide the professional development for teachers as they move into implementation. And I will pause.
Great, thank you, Lisa and Jane. Any questions from the board? Nikki?
Yes. A couple. One, worried on professional development as school is starting soon and our teachers don't really have training for this. And then I'm just going to ask all my questions at once, if that's all right.
Sure.
Two, I am worried on SEAs and how we're going to be able to translate these programs online only to kids who may not understand, who may not be, who can't always handle assessments well. I don't know if they necessarily translate well, and that would, a little more info would be helpful. The third one is, I understand it's 3,000 a school. I know we have 52 plus schools. I know we're currently having a pause on hiring of teachers and leaving certain positions open. Can we afford to do this at this point? Those are my three. And I mean them with all due respect.
Absolutely, Nikki. They're good questions. Let me give them a try. First of all, we believe that this is, as we go into the fall, that it is about our coherent approach to high quality curriculum, instruction, and assessment. We don't think that any of those stand alone. And we wanted an assessment piece that actually filled a gap in the system. And this was a gap in our system. We didn't have interim assessments that teachers could use. So these assessments are familiar to the 8 and 9 ANET schools that currently use them. And we'll be expanding those. Other schools have actually asked to be a part of this. So there is a willingness and a real thirst for this in the organization because it's something that hasn't been here. Should an assessment need to be adapted or modified for students? It can be. That it is a platform of assessments across the standards in English and in Spanish. So there would be nothing that would preclude a teacher from wanting to level up or sort of reestablish what level maybe a student might be at for assessment in order to determine what the next teaching move might mean. For teachers who are working with students with disabilities, when you look at that prior level of performance and the special education services that are specified in an IEP, these tools would be really specific tools that could help to move a student with a specific IEP goal in reading, language arts, or math to the next level. If these assessments, Nikki, weren't appropriate for a student because of the types of services, then it wouldn't be used. There would be something else that would be specified that was more appropriate for that student as written in the IEP. And then the last thing you asked about was professional development. I didn't want to forget about that. We actually feel this is an essential part of professional development. We would get people tooled up for the beginning of the year and then provide consistent support and development through the year on this. If you remember, we have an ANET coach that ANET has provided to the district in supporting these schools, and we actually have an elementary school partner that is specifically working with schools around ANET tools and resources and assessment practices. So we wanted to be sure, I'm with you, Nikki, that if we put something forth, we have a professional development plan that's solid right behind it, because otherwise it's not a good use of funding. So I hope that answered your questions, Nikki.
It did. I was thinking of one other one. Oh, yes. Unlike PALS, can it be done with nonverbal students?
If it was a nonverbal assessment, we would work with the cross-categorical teacher to make sure we did it in an appropriate way.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Nikki. Any other questions?
Chris Gomez.
Chris? Oh, I'm sorry. Chris Carusi and then Chris Gomes-Schmidt.
Actually, I think Chris.
Okay, Gomes-Schmidt.
Okay, thank you. I have a question just trying to understand the assessment strategy slide that you gave us and those different pieces of assessment. So the critical screeners that were in yellow, the instructional assessment ones that are in green, and then the more short cycle. Can we get some more specifics on what those are and maybe how we're adjusting those for this sort of unusual virtual learning year? So I'm really trying to put the pieces together on how we're adjusting because of what we have to do for virtual learning and how much this is going to fit into an ongoing, our ongoing comprehensive assessment system. And then also what adjustments we're needing to make and I understand you guys are building this. There's a lot of work going on this summer to make sure we get things up and running for the fall. Sort of what's getting adjusted from the budget when there's these assessment items and other things that are getting added. Are there things that are falling off or not as prioritized because of this?
Thanks for your questions, Chris. I will give it a try. And then I see Kaylee also has her camera on, so I will also ask her to speak. So first of all, we've been using the ANET proprietary assessments. They are online assessments, so we've been using those before. Those are not new. And it is a bank of items that are used in English language arts. Teachers can use those. They can adapt those. They can They can make them their own, but it's the rigor of these assessments that are most important. They're standards aligned and high quality. When we did the assessment work group, Chris, there were zero. We found one of the findings was that there were zero high quality standards aligned formatives like ANET. We didn't have any. There was a huge just gap in the system, and we partnered with ANET because we found out that that was a gap. I will say, because I bet it's on some of your minds, as we move forward with the K-5 materials adoption in reading, we may find that whatever we choose, whatever resource we choose, has an embedded assessment system within it. And that at that point, maybe you could replace ANET with something else. But right now, we didn't have anything, and we wanted to be able to give teachers some kind of a resource. It's really hard as a teacher to spend lots of your time writing assessments, right? We want our teachers to be teaching. We want them to be reflecting on data and adjusting their practice. And it just happens to be that these online assessments meet a really quite a strong need that we have right now. When we talk about Fastbridge moving forward, that's an extension of what we've already purchased as a PALS replacement and as our early kindergarten screener. So we're expanding the use of that, making the most out of the utility that Fastbridge provides, which is also online. Fastbridge is also very short probes. PALS took a long time to administer, and we didn't get the results back. So they were a very low utility to inform practice. So I'm going to stop there so I don't stammer about something that I'm not speaking correctly about. And Kaylee, is there anything you would add?
Yeah, you did a really good job, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you for passing it over. I would just add, Christina, that all of these assessments have the capability of being online. Okay, every last one of them. That was one of the requirements that we looked at when we were going through and vetting assessments, is that we needed to ensure that they could be taken in this virtual world. This wasn't like it wasn't, you know, that we lost foresight of that. So the way in which these assessments are being administered will not be an issue now or in the future. We absolutely have the possibility in the future to look at these assessments and go, you know what, maybe this isn't the right tool anymore. Now that we're face to face, maybe we switch. But the beautiful thing about it is it is universal, and so we'll be able to administer and use this data whether we're 100% virtual, whether we're hybrid, or face to face. The other thing, Christina, that you asked was, is there anything that we are like taking off the plate with the focus now on assessment and data? And what I would say is that there cannot be quality curriculum and instruction unless there is also quality assessment and response to data, right? Because we can teach all day, every day, until we're blue in the face. But what we want to be sure with assessment and data is that we've got assessments not of learning, but we've got assessment and data for learning, so that we can really use these numbers, this information, to work strategically and to work more effectively. So I hear this argument, and I hear the point around like wanting to be sure that we're not doing too much. I would also just raise that curriculum and instruction and assessment and data must happen at the same time in order for it to be truly effective. And then I know there were a few questions too around budget. Tim, if you had a moment to speak to those, because we do have some replacements.
Hi. Actually, one of the things that we're doing right now is considering the fact that we are no longer giving the MAP assessment, the MAP suite. That actually was more expensive per student than either one of these particular ones. So it's not quite a wash, but it's pretty close.
Just to be clear, the MAP hasn't gone away entirely. Is that just for this year with the virtual learning, because we're not able to give it, or?
The MAP assessment is very difficult to give virtually.
Yeah.
And we also are looking to get our assessments more closely linked to instruction. MAP had the capabilities, but we weren't using it that way. And so now these assessments are quick, to the point, and help teachers and students get the learning assessed and instruction next steps. So long term, we don't know what the future holds for MAP. I could guess and say that we're not going back to it, but that's on the table. We'll see how this year goes.
Yeah, and I guess my question following that would be, we are going to have a discussion of this, and hopefully the comprehensive assessment system will be on our agenda somewhere. I know we're going to talk about agendas later, and hopefully we'll be able to add that so we can get, again, maybe a more detailed information about what is included in that assessment strategy, what the different measures are that fall under that. That would be great.
Great, thank you, Christina. Chris,
Thank you.
Cruzy?
Thanks so much. Your responses answered a bunch of my questions. I really appreciate them. First of all, I'm really glad to hear that we're moving away from high stakes assessment. I think that's the right move for the district. I did have some questions though. It looks like what we're voting on tonight is just 1 year investments in these assessment projects. And I just want to make sure that this isn't part of a longer term contract that we're committing to, just given the short notice we had on voting on this and looking into it. I'd like to make sure that this is just for 1 year. And along with that, I'd like to know if there's a plan in place, or if we're working on a plan to evaluate this investment and see if it's actually improving instruction and outcomes for kids. Like Chris, I would have preferred probably to have this vote be part of a discussion about our overall assessment strategy for the district and how it's changing. I'm glad it's changing, and I hope we do have that discussion down the road. I think it's really important. And I think that discussion needs to not just include standardized tests and formative tests, but also the high school grading changes that we're looking at. And finally, I would like to know how this will be part of educator effectiveness. So just to recap my questions, just the timeline for the contracts or the investment, how this is going to be evaluated. Hopefully, you don't really have to talk about it, but hopefully later tonight we will talk about putting the overall assessment strategy on the agenda, educator effectiveness. Oh, and then one more, coaching. You talked about coaching for ANET at the elementary level, but we're looking at a different program, Illuminate Ed, at the high school level. Will there be similar support available for high school teachers adopting this?
Chris, thanks for those questions. You did read into the memos, and ANET is primarily elementary middle and Illuminate is high school. So that's the parallel assessment system at the high school level. And we are hoping that over the course of Welcome Back and moving into next year, that we provide both the initial professional development and then really that just-in-time professional development that teachers need along the way. We're always conscious of how much happens with teachers before the school year starts, trying to focus in on what is essential before teachers welcome students to their classroom at the beginning of the year. I would imagine that however assessments have been incorporated into educator effectiveness in the past would be very similar to what would happen here. And I think that the data that we collect around assessment, we can certainly talk about that, but we certainly want these assessments to be used. We want these assessments, we want to find out how teachers respond to these and reflect and adjust on the way. And if we are requesting approval in further years for more continued implementation of the assessments, we would definitely come back to you for another consent agenda item, just like we're coming tonight, but hopefully sooner. It wouldn't be under such short timelines. So I hope that got what you were asking, Chris.
I think I just had one more piece about evaluation of the actual tools. Like, are we working on a plan for making decisions about whether to continue this down the road, whether or not it's effective?
I think definitely we would have to. Decisions like this around something as important as assessment, right? We want to have both implementation data. We want to see how it's going, getting feedback. And of course, we still have our comprehensive assessment system cross-functional team meeting. That wasn't just one meeting that happened to design the system. That is an ongoing meeting where folks folks reflect and adjust on what's been used, what's been tried, where do we need to pivot and try it again. We continue to have that committee meet and evaluate and look at what's happening moving forward. We have to collect data in order to make the best decisions.
Great questions. Thank you, everyone. It looks like we have, Ali, and then Ananda.
Yeah, thanks so much. I wanted to ask Lisa, so the total cost of the platforms, I also wanted to ask Kaylee, how much time our students will spend since this goes throughout their education. How much time are we saying kids should spend being assessed throughout their education or yearly? Are we asking kids to spend more time doing these assessments in elementary school? What does this look like for our students who are going to be the ones sitting there experiencing the assessment? And also, what do we do if an assessment doesn't correctly reflect where a student's at?
So Ali, I'm going to take some of it while I think Kaylee or Caroline's looking up the total cost.
Thank you.
So actually, Caroline and I talked a little bit about the time related to assessment. That's a really great question, Ali. And I think I had shared with the board that we actually gave back students as a result of the work the comprehensive assessment system did. We gave back to students 3 days of learning. That's what when we went through, when we pulled out the duplication and the assessments that were not informing instruction, right? The goal is always to give time back to teachers to teach and reflect and try something again, engage with children. Caroline and I did, actually Caroline did, and she and I were talking today about what's the national average, for teachers and for the amount of time students are being assessed, and what is it for MMSD? The national average is about 3 to 4% of time is spent on assessment in schools across the nation. If you take sort of all of our assessments, we're at about 1.9% of our time across the district because we have sort of taken out those that are redundant or duplicative and replaced them with the shorter probes that give us more information. Some of the assessments are required, right? The access test for English language learners, if the forward test happens, I'm not sure what the state is actually going to do about that. But instructional assessments, if you look at instructional assessments for, let's say, 8th grade, that is less than 0.8% of time.
Lisa,
so that's a general. Go ahead, Ali.
I'm really sorry because I know I have a couple other questions, but I just want to say that it's really hard for me when you say 8% to understand, hey, a second grader is going to spend 2 hours over the course of a year. So when you say 8%, I have a really hard time breaking that down into like how much actual instruction time. So on average, per age group, per grade, how many hours does this assessment take? How much time does it take for a kiddo to do this assessment, or how much time does a student have to do this assessment?
Kaylee, do you want to talk about the individual assessments and how much time they take?
So we did that math for 8th grade in particular, and 8th grade throughout the year, it equates to 9 hours of instructional assessments, which then breaks down to, again, less than 0.8% of instructional hours throughout the school year. What we see with the number of hours for 8th grade is going to be very similar throughout the rest of our grade levels because they're following a similar screener and interim assessment schedule. Ali, I 1000% understand the concern around the number of minutes that we're using towards assessment. And I will tell you that I do not believe that we should be giving assessments for the sake of giving assessments. If we are giving an assessment, then that we should be saying, we are saying that what we are measuring in that assessment matters. And because it matters, we are using that now as educators to make better and wiser decisions so that we are more efficient in our teaching. What we want to be sure is happening, Ali, is that those 9 hours that are used to give students, or to, excuse me, to give teachers data and students and families, that those are capitalized on, right? And that those 9 hours are ensuring that instruction is strong. Because on the other flip of that, Allie, is if we don't have the data, then how do we know that those 9 hours that weren't used giving us data is actually getting us to the growth and mastery that our students deserve and need?
I completely hear that point. I feel like 9 hours of assessment is a pretty intense and rigorous amount of assessment if you're 7 years old or 11 years old, or even as an adult. I think that's a pretty intense amount of time to spend being assessed or evaluated. That being said, my second question was, what do we do if an assessment doesn't give us an accurate reflection of where a kiddo is at? What if we learn from the test that the kid didn't like the test, but we don't actually learn anything about the kid's ability to read?
I think, Kaylee, let me try this. I think that's the importance of having multiple measures, right? That one test does not define, one assessment does not define a child. All good teachers have multiple measures in their toolbox, or we support them with that. So just want to be really clear that, something that's packaged and something that that a teacher creates and does on their own, right, can also tell us really informative things about how a child learns. But because, again, as I said before, this was where the gap was in the system, and we know that teachers want to create this and they want to do their own. This gives them a bit of a jump start, gives them some good models to look at. And eventually, like I said, we evaluate it. Maybe you pull it out and you rely on other things. But I agree. We want the most time to be spent in instruction. That 9 hours, Kaylee, that you presented, you're saving much more than that down the road, and kids are getting more on target instruction if we know more about where they're at. So I appreciate the comments, Ali, and
No, Lisa, thank you so much.
I would stress multiple measures for sure.
Thank you so much for speaking to this not being the be all and end all of how we're looking at folks' kiddos, right? And then my last question was very specific to the total cost of the assessments K through 12.
Caroline, do you have the cost on that?
They're in our motions.
Yeah, it's right on the memo. Let's see.
So when we talked to earlier,
99,000, right? 99.
it's right around 130, and it's a cumulative cost across.
A board consent for ANET. I'm not able to pull that up.
So what we're working on right now is 99,000 is what we're looking at.
Yep. Oh, there it is. It's in the
memo.
Yep, it's in the back of the memo. So
and
it is.
That has a significant discount included.
Right, it does.
Okay.
Yep. So the achievement network is 99,000, and the purchase of the additional Fastbridge at the secondary level, that is $135,000 for the addition of Fastbridge licenses from Illuminate Education.
Thank you so much. Those are all of my questions.
Okay, Ananda and then Savion.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Lisa and Kaylee, for all this work. Kaylee, did I say your name right? Okay, thank you. I really appreciate the framing the challenge, because I do think assessments are extremely complicated challenge. And I also appreciate the language around unpacking, because I think that deconstructing what assessment is and what in particular in our school district is it's going to be a it is, and it will continue to be a pretty intense task. We are where we are currently with our data, not because we haven't done assessment, right? Like our children have been assessed very intensively in our school district, yet they haven't done the thing that you, Kaylee, is trying to accomplish. So I appreciate you sharing your goal with assessment with us. I think unfortunately, assessments have not yield those results. And for some of us, assessment has hurt our children. I think back to Ali's question, you know, when a child gets assessed and the assessment is not reflective of their brilliance at a very early age, what does it do to a child? And my daughter's been attending the district since she was in kindergarten. She's about to graduate next year. And we have been through many different types of assessments. And I have yet to see an assessment that have measured or have got close to measure all the amazingness that she is. And I know that I'm not a parent, a lone parent voice on this. I think part of your framework is asking us to be perhaps a little bit more hopeful in regards to the way that you're framing this, and in particular, this assessment that I am not very familiar, so I can't speak to it. I have a couple of questions in regards to the framing. How does EL assessments and assessments for students with different abilities will connect with this framing around assessment in general, or if at all?
So the assessments that we're talking about here, the ANET assessments, are in English and Spanish. It is one of the reasons that we chose this platform, because it was one of the few that had standards aligned grade level assessments. And this bank of formative assessments can be used by any and all teachers. They can pick and choose from grade level standards or from other standards that would best inform instruction. It's essentially a bank or a platform of assessments that can be used in a variety of ways.
Yes, and I would add, Ananda, to your point around the purpose of these assessments. I want to be clear in saying that this is an assessment that measures standards and growth, right? Standards in growth as it relates to academics. It does not measure brilliance. It does not measure joy. It does not measure love. It does not measure kindness, right? And that's also not the intent. Okay, with these assessments, with this data, it is not ever to shame a child. It is not ever to weaponize at all. What it is a tool for teachers. It is a tool for teachers to plan wisely and to teach wisely. So I hear you on that, and I want to be clear in communicating that I do not see any sort of an assessment, particularly one that is a written assessment with words and A's, B's, and C's and D's, as being tied to the value of a child, of anyone. And so I want you to be comfortable knowing that that will be the message that goes out, right? That this is a tool for teachers. It is not something that is evaluative of our students. With the EL assessments and students with disabilities, we have the capabilities of giving accommodations to these assessments, and those will be used in order to be sure that all students are getting the right modifications and accommodations necessary, so that the data that teachers are provided with is accurate.
Mm-hmm. And then a couple more questions, maybe a little bit more quickly. One is, I know, Lisa, you mentioned DPI is still in the really long conversation about assessments. How are we intending to translate current recommendations or any future recommendations to how are we moving forward with this? What decisions are we making now based on, like, or that we're deciding not to make based on what you're sharing with us?
So we're going to see how this goes, how use of these assessments go this year in a virtual world, right? That's all very new to us. I think, as Chris pointed out earlier, we'll have to figure out and take note of how this goes with children. How do children respond? What do teachers see? And make decisions moving forward. I think it's important to note that ANET is working with the Department of Public Instruction and the Big Five school districts, not on just assessment, but also on what does high quality, rigorous, standards-based instruction look like, where assessment is one component of that. The Achievement Network does lots of work with schools and districts around system development, around high quality instruction. And something that I was thinking about before is, we have grades, right? We give students grades in middle and high school, and we have a standards-based report card in elementary school that, that we're still finding our way through. We know that, right, the way that teachers grade is not completely objective, right? There's bias that creeps in there. And we're working on that. We're working on that with our approach to secondary grading, with our approach to the high school grading scales that someone said they wanted to talk about. These assessments in ANET and Illuminate are consistent. And whether a student takes an ANET assessment on the east side or the west side of town, we'll be able to know if that child has mastered a specific skill. And if not, what we can do about it. So this is part of sort of that whole way of thinking about grading and learning and how to eliminate the bias that we know exists. And how does this fit into a bigger picture? How does it increase the clarity of assessments? How does it help us to align our purpose and our use of assessments? So I just wanted to say that we see this as a way to really get after some of that and professionally develop our teachers to know exactly what rigorous grade level content looks like and how we can get kids there.
Thank you. I just have one final point. I appreciate, Lisa, thank you so much for that. It's really helpful to help me understand. I think, as you know, historically, assessments have not done well for Black and Brown children or English language learners. I think what I'm curious, or maybe as a recommendation around the framing of assessments, what I noticed and what happened to my daughter is that we do the assessment and then we have the scores, and the scores get sent to parents. And then the parents receive the scores and they might feel all sort of ways for the low numbers, but they are like now believing the school, what their school is saying is that teachers are now have a better information of what's happening with the students. So next year we're gonna try again and make sure that those scores are different. And next year come and there's another assessment and the numbers are still low. And the next year, another assessment comes and the numbers too low. So there is a expectation that something is wrong with the child. There is a inherited or subliminal sort of interpretation that there's something wrong with the child, that the child is not changing. And there's a expectation that something is being done at the instruction level, at the teacher's level, in order to address the low numbers of assessment or not a great assessment. I think for me, what would be helpful is to know, like, how do we, when we end up having whatever the low number assessment is for this particular assessment, how do we hold ourselves as school district, as schools, as instructors accountable for those numbers? Assessments should not be a measurement of student. Assessment should be a measurement of instruction, a measurement of the educational system, a measurement of our school district, a measurement of schools. And that is, I'm just making this point. I think that for me, that's one piece that needs to be shifted. And I truly believe that, you know, if we can start tapping into that and taking much more responsibility to what's happening to assessment, I think we'll maybe interrupt some of the perpetual injustices that we have created in education. But thank you so much, both for your work.
Ananda, that's great. Thank you for ending on that. Very real. So thank you for pointing that out. Savion, and
Yeah,
then we'll.
Okay. Yeah, I have about 3.5 questions. It seems like we're on year 2 of 5 for implementing this. Can you speak to things we learned last year and how this maybe have helped a teacher's ability to help their student get to the next level of learning? And then related to Chris Carusi's questions, how can we use this, or how can this help us accelerate transitioning to qualitative assessments at the middle school and high school level? Related to that, will this help us bring synergy between the high school level and the middle school level and the middle school level and the elementary level? And then my last question is on how teachers will implement this. So is this an assessment that you know, teachers have to do one-on-one with students? You mentioned 8 hours. So if a teacher if a teacher has, you know, 15 students in their classroom, then that's 8 times 15 for, you know, doing assessing. So what's the impact on the teacher's time?
I'm going to take part of those, Savion, and then I'll have Kaylee address some of the other ones around the teacher's time. So thank you for the questions, Savion. So last year, what we learned is that we actually needed to lay the foundation for a comprehensive assessment system and build the capacity of our students, families, and staff to understand what a comprehensive assessment system includes and what its purpose is. As I said last year, when we did a landscape analysis of all of our assessments, we realized that we had too many evaluative assessments, including MAP, and we did not have enough formative assessments that were brief, and we also did not have enough high quality assessments that were actually standards aligned. And you know, I learn every day with the people that are on my team, and Kaylee and I were talking the other day. So Miss Kaylee, you taught me some lessons. This notion of assessment at the high school, right, aligning to the level of rigor in the ACT, right, as the North Star, that level of rigor. The test itself, whether it's there or not, whether the ACT is part of our portfolio or not, that level of rigor is what we want our students to aspire to. And what we found, Savion, is that we have a very robust 9th grade on track system with all kinds of inputs and data and ways to look at students, but we don't have a 10th grade on track. We don't have an 11th grade on track, and we don't really have a 12th grade on track. So for us not to know how children are doing after 9th grade on track data, for us not to have a common measure, felt very urgent to us. And that's why we're moving forward with the Illuminate piece that we felt matched really nicely when it comes to English language arts and math. We know 9th graders especially we need to watch and wrap around algebra, around those English skills, but we don't stop then, right? We want to know how those students are matriculating into higher level courses, how successful are they, and are we designing courses and curriculum that are at the level of rigor that a child deserves. So we learned all of that last year, and we learned last year in specific when it comes to MAP that MAP had very low utility for us. So we are also starting to look at some of the other measures that are out there that give us more information. We also learned last year, as I said earlier, that PALS was really pretty unhelpful. It took a long time to administer. and did not give us feedback immediately. You know, we gave it in October. You don't get the results until November or December, and you've lost a whole semester if you don't have a tool to learn from. And we also heard that teachers wanted, with whatever assessment we were using, to have high quality professional development, both front loaded. We need to know before what we're supposed to do, and then just in time along the way. I have a question, who can I talk to? And we learned that our instructional coaches in our buildings are really good resources. That's an investment that the board has made over the years, that our instructional coaches are that in-building resource around curriculum instruction and assessment to go to. And we also know, it'll be the last thing, and then I'll turn it over to Kaylee. We also know, right, that teachers are craving information, even now more than ever, and families are craving information. It's what kind of actionable feedback can we give to children and families? You know, the last thing that a family wants to hear when a family says, so how's my child reading? And a teacher says, well, they're about on grade level, or they're a little behind, or they're really above. That is unhelpful as a parent. This kind of assessment gives language to what a child is learning, gives language to the skills that a child's doing great on, or a child needs to progress on. So that's the other piece of it that we think is powerful for teachers, is it gives them the language to provide feedback, and the language for children to know what they're doing really well on and what they're still working on to get better at as well. Kaylee?
Thank you, Lisa. I want to speak briefly to the topic of time for assessments. And I just want to be sure that I clarify when I spoke to about 8 to 9 hours of assessments, that's for the year, right? So we're talking about 1 hour per month of assessment, or on average 15 minutes a week of assessment. We are not talking about 8 or 9 hours of sitting and taking a test at all. We're talking over the length of our school year. When we can break that down, no problem, Ali. When we break that down a little bit by grade level, for example, grades 3 through 8, our screener is Fastbridge, and that takes students 15 minutes to accomplish, right? For K2, our screener is also Fastbridge. They take that 3 times a year. That only takes them 5 minutes to accomplish, okay? And the data, again, that we get from that is so robust that it is keeping our teachers, our leaders, our teacher leaders, our instructional coaches, principals, with their eyes on the target and our eyes on growth and mastery and grade level standards.
Savion, anything else?
Yeah, just about how it can help build synergy from the high school level to the middle school level, middle school to elementary, and vice versa.
Sure, Savion, that's a great question, and one that I'm excited to talk about, because anything with alignment, I just get excited about. So the beautiful thing about this approach, Savion, is that it is not an isolated approach. Okay, so it is the same approach that is happening in grades 4K5, 6, 8, and 9, 12, with it being a comprehensive academic assessment strategy that both includes a screener. So we are identifying the skills that we're missing because of unfinished learning, and we're coupling that with the grade level mastery. Okay, so every grade will have this same approach. So there is complete alignment in what grade level expectations are and look like as far as academics and standards go across the entire district. There is no room for a gap with this plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nikki, and then we're gonna finish this up. Nikki, you're on mute.
Is the assessment, I just want to make this point, the assessments, besides being expensive, and that can have a effect grade-wise. If if my school and my parents followed my assessments, I'd be in the Lakeland School for the Severely Disabled. That's what my test score said, because because it involved motor planning, and half of those tests do require it. So how do we separate the two to make sure someone isn't wrongly diagnosed? I know I saw that earlier, that we want to avoid misdiagnosis, and I don't want to put someone in a situation where those test scores could put them in a track where they never get the classes that they want or the ability. My parents had the ability to challenge that through grievance and through threats of lawsuit. Not everyone has the money or the time.
Nikki, thank you for that. I would reiterate that again, this is one piece of an overall system. I think we always want to be sure in a system there are multiple measures. And I would also say this is exactly the kind of actionable data that teacher teams use, right? A team of teachers, a team of adults, including parents, that might serve to develop an IEP for a student with a disability. That this is really an excellent tool for teacher teams to be using. Teaching is a job that doesn't have to be isolating. We have worked very hard over the past 7 years to develop a systematic approach to how teacher teams work together, how schools examine data, how Savion, as you mentioned, how that transition happens, right? How we're really thinking about children being successful across the levels, and using multiple measures to do that, so that we can really see what children are learning and move to the next teaching point with some good data.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Gloria, can I ask just a quick question to Tim?
Tim, are you? Yep.
I'm
Hi,
here.
Tim. Hi.
Hey, Linda.
Hi. I'm wondering if we have seen any change among its parents waiving their assessments. And do you, what is your take on that happening to this assessment?
We have seen it hold pretty steady. We have not seen a great increase. Of course, this last year, pretty much the bottom fell out on everything. But in the last 2 years prior, things were pretty steady. This has been a concern of mine, but what I see different here is, again, the instruction coming from and tied directly to the assessments versus the assessments going off and living somewhere else. So by having that strong link to the classroom, by the teachers being able to say, you know, I use this data, and having the students say, understand what the test is about, why they're taking it. Those, I think, are key pieces that are different than what we've had in the past.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, that I think I already asked a lot of questions, but I think that would be my other point of curiosity for a follow-up is like, how are we listening to the teachers? Because I think the teachers already knew what Lisa shared around the amount of assessments. So how are we going to continue to kind of get data from teachers regarding whether assessments are helpful or not?
Yeah, Nanda, and I think, as I said, the Comprehensive Assessment System Work Group continues to be up and healthy and running. I would also say that this assessment is close to instruction, right? This is really close to the work of a teacher. This is not the assessment that you post in an annual report. This is not the assessment that you put up there with the forward exam or even the MAP exam. This is assessment that's very skill specific. And if a family, you know, this is an assessment where, you know, you could have a family try it out, could look at the bank themselves to see what it is. So I just want to say that our teachers have asked for that, and we want to be able to support them and see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, we reflect and adjust. But we feel pretty good about this assessment and these assessments, and we do not see this as publicly posted. Right? As educators, you get that little fear in the pit of your stomach when they start putting that in the paper. And this is not about that. This is about really using this information to drive instruction.
Okay. Great discussion, you all. This is great. Thank you, Lisa, Kaylee, and Tim for answering those questions so thoroughly. Let's go ahead and make the motion here. I move that the Board of Education approve the purchase of additional ANET, ELA interim assessment licenses from Achievement Network in the total amount of $99,000 for use in elementary and middle schools with funds from the Office of Assessment Administration operating budget for the 2020-21 school year.
Second, Ali.
Ali, second. Any further discussion? Okay, Julia, your advisory vote?
Oh, I think there was a discussion from Carusi.
Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for the great discussion and the questions that got raised. And in the process of thinking about this during this discussion, you know, I actually disagree that our teachers are unanimously asking for standardized formative assessments. I think there are some teachers who are asking for that, but I think there's also concern about how this is going to be implemented, and the fact that all of our staff will be asked to use a standardized formative assessment as part of their instruction is problematic. So for that reason, I'm not able to support this, but I really do appreciate all the information you present.
Great, thank you. Julia, your advisory vote?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all those in favor, aye, show your hand so I can see them. Aye. Okay. Okay, all those opposed? Okay, we got 5-2. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, next, purchase of Illuminate Ed's DNA and additional Fastbridge assessment licenses for 2020-21. Jane, is that?
Yeah, I
Or
think
we-
we pretty much
That's it?
covered that in this conversation. So I think you're probably ready to do the vote on that.
Anybody
Unless you
else?
have any questions.
Chris? Christina Gomes-Schmidt?
Yeah, I just have a quick clarification. With the additional Fastbridge licenses, I'm just trying to understand, and this is probably a question for Tim. Are we replacing MAP this year with Fastbridge?
Thank you. Yes, we are.
Okay, and MAP is an online tool too. I mean, the students already do the online testing for MAP.
They're both online, but the difference is, can you give it virtually?
Okay.
MAP is online, but it really needs to be in person.
Okay. And then again, so this is just for this year, and we are somewhere along this year going to evaluate MAP, Fastbridge, those other assessments.
Yes, we were in the process of doing that in March, and we'll be bringing decisions to you.
Okay, thank you.
Great, anything else? All right. I move that the Board of Education approve the purchase of DNA and additional Fastbridge licenses from Illuminate Education in the total amount of $135,000 with funding from the Office of Assessment Administration operating budget for the 2020-21 school year. Can I get a second?
Second.
Savion, second. Any further discussion? Okay, Julia, your advisory vote? Aye, okay. All those in favor, aye. Show your hands. Okay, all those opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-2. Barb, you got that? Okay. Let's move on to the next agenda item, the proposed South Rimrock Road School.
So Barb, could you put up the PowerPoint? Even though we've already kind of moved along, I'd like to get to that third slide. Yeah, so this is our organizational meeting. So we have a few things that we wanted to accomplish in addition to the ANET discussion. and the assessment discussion. So next slide, please. We're going to be talking about the South Rimrock Road Elementary School. We're going to look at the board's ways of working and the 2021 topics to review at the board meetings. And finally, we'll talk about the fall elementary renaming process. So you'll recall that as part of our long-range facility planning, the work that has been in process since 2017, the need for a new elementary school in the Rimrock Road area was identified. This began a year-long process of data analysis and community feedback to embed an elementary school into the November 2020 referendum. During the fall of 2019, community sessions were held throughout Madison to gain perspectives of the community about the referendum, including the perspectives on the possible new elementary school. In July, the board voted to place 2 referenda questions on the ballot in November. You approved that a school in the Rimrock Road area be considered by voters at that time. There has been further follow-up since that time with groups in the communities. The instructional programming at the school has not yet been finalized. So tonight, we present a recommendation from the administration to move forward with a process for determining the programming at the new school if the referendum passes. I would just say that tonight's information is for discussion only. The board can vote at the regular meeting to finalize and approve the recommendation and the process going forward. I'm going to turn this over to Mike Herding, our Chief of Staff and also a referendum team member, to share more details about this. And then Gloria will guide your discussion.
Thank you. And Barb, you can take it off the screen share. Good evening, board members. Happy Monday. Thank you for being here. We're excited to move this work forward and start to make decisions with a referendum. We make the following recommendation with respect to the proposed elementary school in the Rimrock Road area. The administration recommends the Board of Education, contingent on the November 2020 passing referendum, construct a new elementary school in the South Rimrock Road area for any elementary student living in the South Rimrock Road neighborhood. We further recommend that once the referendum is passed, a group be formed to determine programming options for the new elementary school. Finally, we recommend that as part of the long-range facility plan that we've been working on, that Nuestro Mundo Community School relocate to the current Frank Alice site to align with Nuestro Community Schools board's vision and alignment of their expansion of their program. Options for the new school based on the community feedback gathered so far could include the following: specific programs such as social emotional learning, social justice, environmental education, sustainability, or perhaps designation as a community school. As we think about this recommendation, we took the following into consideration. This plan provides a neighborhood school attendance area for all children living in the South Rimrock Road area without having to enter a lottery process. We like that it allows community neighborhood input in the programming elements of the new school at a future time when the COVID-19 precautions may not hinder participation. It provides choices for the students living in that area, including maintaining access to Nuestro Mundo Community School Lottery, as well as retaining their current school of attendance. And most importantly, this avoids setting up a competition between two stakeholder groups for the neighborhood school. We've worked on this, as Jane mentioned, for quite a while. We're happy to bring forth this recommendation. And at this point, the referendum team members will join me and address your questions. So thank you so much for your attention, and we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, any questions, comments for Mike and the team?
Gloria, just before we go into that, I think I would just like to make this statement. Having heard both individuals earlier, the chair for New Estro and also from Pastor Allen, first of all, I'm just so glad that we had that opportunity to hear from our community members. This is a very sensitive thing, and I think it's a good. Sometimes you do trying to do well, and it just seems as if though it's a very sensitive situation, and it is a very sensitive situation. But I really support this recommendation, and I ask that we take what the chair of New Estro also said into account, because when you start to talk about having a school design and students don't have access to that school from all over the city, and she mentioned transportation being a serious situation in terms of it's not being supported fully. So however we move forward, I think we have to think very comprehensively so we can sustain the effort to grow New Estro's vision in terms of what they want to do. And I think staying in the community with a community school, as was said there by Dr. Herding, it really does helps a community, particularly during these unprecedented times that we have now as well.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for that. Ananda?
Yeah, thank you, Gloria, and thank you, Dr. Jenkins, and thank you, Mike, for so much work you have done around the trying to get community input and trying to put a package together in preparation for this. I also heard the voice of Francesca, and I heard the voice of Pastor Allen, both highlighting the complications of this decision, but also I heard information from both of them that that is a reflection on early information that our district had in regards to this school. And so I just wanted to take a moment to highlight them. I know so many of you have heard me share my own story with Nostromondo, and because of we have new board member and new superintendent, if you don't mind, I'm gonna reshare the story. When my daughter was about to be in school age, I was living on the east side, right by the Barrymore Theater. And I was searching for a school that had a balance in enrollment between students of color. I was also looking at what, the data and performance data for the schools as well. And at that time, my daughter was attending preschools that predominantly had a large number of white students, and she was starting to get embarrassed the fact that she spoke Brazilian Portuguese. And I felt I learned about Nostromondo and the mission that they have, and I felt it was really important for her to have a cultural capital of being someone that was bilingual at that time. And also to be with people that look like her and non-white students. So I enrolled her in Nostromondo. It was the first year that Nostromondo had a lottery. And the lottery, I know people say lottery, and lottery means lots of different things all over the country. And Nostromondo, lottery means when you have a greater number of students enrolled in an attendance area, and the attendance area of Nostromondo is part of the east side, which is predominantly white, and part of the south side, the Rimrock area, which is predominantly brown and black. And the school was already in such demand that it was the first year that there was not, even though we moved to the east side, there was so much demand that we got into a waiting list early in the spring of that year. Of course, we were really nervous. We really wanted her to be in that school. And then before the fall, she was accepted, and she attended Nostro Mundo from kindergarten to 5th grade. When she was in when she was in 2nd grade, she was in a class with 30 other students, with 2 amazing teachers, but one of them was a fairly new teacher. And that was when I learned that a lot of students, a lot of Latinx students were experiencing very similar than my daughter. Overcrowded school. So at that time, Nostro Mundo was sharing the building with Frank Ellis. There was a lot of dissent, and Mike is shaking her head because he remembers that. There was a lot of dissent, a lot of racial tension in that school. We also learned that our students were the students that spend the longest bus rides in Madison. We learned that we had the least amount of resources. We learned that our students were really experiencing things very different than other students in Madison. And I say we as myself and other parents of Latinx students, as well as other white parents, we started advocating for a new school. We needed to move. At that time, the administration said repeatedly to us that there was no building on the South Side because we wanted to be somewhere closer to our neighborhood. Most of us live in the South Side. I was living in the South Side at that time. And we wanted school closer because the other issue is that we also learned that parent engagement was really challenging because a lot of our parents relied on 1 car per household. And a lot of the parents had a 2nd shift job, and it would take the car, and then the other parent couldn't use public transportation because public transportation from the South Side to anywhere else in the city, it's very sad. It's very sad. So we wanted a school in the South Side, and we advocated for that. And then the best the administration could come up for us at that time was a school in Monona. At that time, I was a parent, the chair of the parent group, and then I also then became a Nostro Mundo board, and was able to be in negotiation with the district, and really saw like, I'm just gonna be really direct because that's how I am. The district really just set up how they wanted us to have the building a specific way, and the limitations because the school was small, the limitations with the programming because we always wanted to expand the program because of the high demand. And the school wasn't on the South Side, but it was closer. So we settled with Maywood, that's the Monona school, and it was definitely closer. It was definitely much more accessible, and it was our building. We had our building. When we first started having conversations about having a school on the South Side, there were a lot of things that we did not know. We did not know what the size of the school. So we thought at first that the school was going to be small. So when Francesca says we wanted the program to grow, was because the early information is that the school in the South Side was going to be significantly small than Alice. In regards to attendance area, we have talked extensively about figuring out ways to have an attendance area that would prioritize the South Side, which means that would prioritize where a lot of the Spanish-speaking families live, in order for the sustainability of the program, but also would prioritize Black and African American community to finally access dual language program. I have heard a lot of Black and African American families that get into the lottery at Midvale and other schools, but they don't get in because they are competing with a large number of white families. They are native speakers. So there is a lottery for if you're a Spanish speaker, and there's a lottery for if you're English native speaker. So those are 2, or non-native Spanish speaker. There's 2 different lotteries happening. And when Pastor Allen was talking about lottery, the lottery would only exist if there was not enough space for English speakers in that school. So there is a lot of, I appreciate both of their advocacy, but there's a lot of things that is coming from a gap in our communication. And I, as part of the school district, I'll take responsibility that we could have done a better job in communicating in some of the things we did not know at that time. I respect the advocacy, I respect where people are at. I really hope that from now until whenever we have to vote, that we can just go back to Pastor Allen, to Francesca, and to our community and say, well, what if you have a bigger building? And well, what if you have an attendance area that prioritizes Black and African American enrollment, so Black and African American engage in public education and learn Spanish? A lot of people, when they hear me advocate for dual language, they assume that I'm a native Spanish speaker. I am not a native Spanish speaker, but now my daughter speaks 3 different languages. And I find in a country where the second most spoken language is Spanish, and be able to have that education in the public school is really important. The third point that was brought up by the advocates today was around the mobility of our community, which is absolutely a point of consideration. I do think that there are ways in which we can address the mobility issue by the same way in which we would be doing if we were to open the school to a larger attendance area, providing transportation, a comprehensive transportation strategy. I think one of the first points around not wanting to have a school where African American and Black students wouldn't be able to access past kindergarten. There are schools, so dual language programs exist in a lot of Black and Brown neighborhoods all over the country. I have heard that Sylvia Romero Johnson is not available to be in this meeting because her and I have had lots of conversations about this. There are multiple ways in which we can address that. I think it's depending on our willingness and also our collective understanding, like is learning Spanish a value added to all communities, in particular the Black and African American communities. Because what has happened here in Madison is that dual language program is something that only white parents are advocating, and that is a missed opportunity for a lot of students. I think I also have heard that dual language program is not beneficial for kids with disabilities, for example. That is also not true. So I think that there's a lot of myths around dual language that our community is still learning and still has a lot of work to do. And I really hope that we can kind of close some of this communication gap and to be able for people to advocate for the right information versus the sort of the gaps in communication. So thank you so much for letting me spending quite a bit of a time and just kind of walking through some of the historical aspects of my advocacy for that really important school.
Thank you, Ananda. Any staff want to respond to anything or? I think, Ananda, you bring up some great points. I do believe we have to do better at really moving the needle in supporting our African American families into DLI. I think it's such a benefit. We've seen the positive outcomes in our African American families across the country. When we have that, I think that in this recommendation, I know that based on my communications with our African American families, our leaders, that this is, and speaking with Nuestro Mundo community, that this is the route that they want to go. And but I also agree that there is an opportunity for us to explore in ensuring that we are increasing and opening our doors for DLI in West El Mundo, in particular, to allow families to move into that school. And we can still do that, right? I think that we have an opportunity to explore what our options are and do better at recruiting our African-American families into that school. We need to do better.
Yeah, the only comment that I would add from the staff perspective is I agree with the discussion about DLI and the future of DLI programming. And I know that the board has the ELL plan that's coming before them. And I think that you're asking some very good questions about DLI and establishing types of programs and that all students have access to those programs. So I look forward to the ELL plan coming before the board. Sorry, Ali, just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Mike. Ali?
Thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge that I saw Chris Carusi's hand go up pretty simultaneously with mine. So thanks for noticing me. And also, I can't wait to hear what you have to say in speaking to this. Ananda, I want to thank you for the tremendous amount of vulnerability and personalness that you bring to this in terms of, you know, what your own child experienced and the work that you've done to contribute to Nuestro Mundo, which is a fantastic school. I similarly have been incredibly disturbed by the lack of opportunity for African-American students to participate in dual language immersion. But I think when you're talking about the way the Black community has been included in education and conversations about education, that's a really broad conversation. And so I think prioritizing the leadership of the African-American community on the South Side in designing this school and really, you know, being open to the many possibilities that that leadership allows for us to explore, which still includes dual language immersion, right? So saying that this school isn't Nuestro Mundo does not take this school having a variety of opportunities for young people in terms of expansive relationships to language off the table. And so I think, you know, I really appreciate what I heard from you, Carlton, in terms of really listening to the community members that came forward this evening. And I hope that as we have this conversation, that we really emphasize the opportunity to do really incredible things. And I would ask us to be cautious in terms of pitting communities against each other or advocating for communities without, you know, listening to the leadership within those communities. But I would also caution us against approaching this conversation from the perspective of scarcity, because this is about, you know, funneling a robust amount of support to our district through our community and being excited about the options to really make learning you know, accessible to all of our students and to really serve communities that have been underrepresented in this process. So I'm very hopeful for this conversation. And I think that making sure that young people on the South Side in that immediate area have the ability to walk to school and are no longer on one of our longest bus rides is a really big deal and is a really exciting opportunity. I also really appreciate the emphasis on making sure that the attendance area actually results in the kids who live in that neighborhood being able to have access to the school in their immediate community. Those are my comments at this point. Thank you so much for listening, y'all.
Great, thank you, Ali. Chris Carusi, and then Nikki.
So thank you, Ali, and thank you, Ananda, for sharing that history of Nuestro Mundo. That was really helpful to see through your eyes, so thank you. I want to circle back to what Dr. Jenkins said at the beginning of this conversation, that this is a big decision and it's a very sensitive decision. And because of that, in the fall, when we were doing all of our community listening sessions, I went to all of the sessions related to this decision. I went to the session at Frank Alice, I went to the session at Nuestro Mundo, and I attended the session on the South Side at Badger Rock. And, you know, there were limitations much of the discussion at the Nuestro Mundo meeting was in Spanish, which I don't speak. The Badger Rock meeting, the attendance could have been better. But basically what I heard at those meetings reflects, I think pretty accurately, what the administration is recommending. The community at Nuestro Mundo spoke very strongly in favor of moving to Frank Alice, and the early education goals that were stated earlier by Francesca Rodriguez definitely were on people's minds. They would like to see expansion of the number of grade levels served at Nuestro Mundo, particularly in terms of early education. Frank Alice, that was probably where I heard the most concern about moving to the south side, but that concern came from families who live in the Frank Alice attendance area, who live close to the school and were didn't want to lose their neighborhood school, basically. And I think we need to have a conversation. Should we move a community school to the south side and have Frank Alice serve as a dual language school, which is a charter school? What happens with attendance area boundaries for families that live close to Frank Alice right now? Because one of our goals is to eliminate long bus rides for as many students as possible. When we met at Badger Rock, I heard very clearly that people wanted a community school in that neighborhood. So I just want to reinforce that I do think the administration is on the right track based on what we heard from the community at the community meetings related to the referendum. And I appreciate the challenges of the decision. I appreciate the voice of everybody on this board, as well as the community members and staff who have spoken about this issue. And I do appreciate that we've taken the time to bring some thought and wisdom to this decision.
Thank you very much. The reason I am speaking is I want to raise something Ananda raised. I too was first told when I started on the board that disability and dual language immersion isn't possible. And Nuestro Mundo was the first school that I was assigned to. And I've worked with several special ed teachers from the Nuestro Mundo who happen to handle that issue quite well, and showed quite well that DLI and IEPs can work just fine. And that's the only issue I want to talk on. My only worry on Frank Alice is if it is fully accessible enough for disabled students. That's my only concern on that. As for the other issue, I think that's up to the community, and I want to research more because I truly am torn at this point.
Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah, Nikki, we did in the last referendum, 2016, spend I think close to 2 million putting in both a lift and a elevator, as well as changing the design of the floor so that there weren't so many levels. So we do think it greatly improved the accessibility for all students at that school.
Because when I was there, when I visited, their elevator was not functional, so I had to use the lift. It kind of scared the living heck out of me.
I have not heard that, but thank you for keeping us on top of accessibility.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks. Great discussion. So if you have any questions, Sabian.
So thank you, Ananda, for your story earlier, and I really respect your voice on this. And thank you, Dr. Jenkins, as well, for keeping us grounded in this discussion. I think from my perspective, it is important that the school that it ends up in this neighborhood be accessible to all families and students at all grade levels. Personally, I think this is an exciting opportunity to build a school for our students, particularly our Black and Brown students, that our district hasn't done before in terms of how we choose the instructional design for this building. We can extend our community schools program to the south side, one that focuses on Black excellence and our diverse coalition of students, and has a linguistically diverse and reflective curriculum. I think that this recommendation does preserve our ability to be flexible to reflect what the community wants. Like Chris, I did attend a few of the community input sessions last fall, and I think it is reflective of those desires. There are certainly concerns, as Chris mentioned, with boundary lines, but I think that this recommendation is probably most reflective and responsible for what the community has expressed to us thus far.
Yep, okay. Christina? And then we'll close this out.
Thanks everybody for this great discussion on this. And another thing, I'm getting up to speed on this discussion and the community components of this. I think I just wanted to add, in addition to the transportation for students, having a community school on the south side makes the school more accessible to parents to get involved in the school. Because the transport isn't as far for parents to do teacher meetings and other things like that to really be involved in the school. And again, the chance for a community to design the instructional model is something that I think makes that a really strong argument for that. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Ananda, did you have some more?
I'll be brief. I will say that because this community has been neglected for so long, there is no most equitable decision here. There is the least inequitable decision. And whatever decision we make, there will be some serious consequence. And we just needed to know what they are. Because when people say about, parents are going to be able, families are going to be able to, which families are we talking about? Because a lot of the families that live here, my neighbors, they will go to Nostromundo and Frank Ellis. They will continue, go back to where we used to be 10, 13 years ago to be driving the longest in the school district. So brown families are going to go to Nostromundo. Black families are going to be here. And maybe a couple of brown families. Nostromundo will continue to be in the space of trying to recruit Black families, which when I was working for the district, I was assigned to be recruiting Black families to drive the longest because the east side is predominantly white, and it's going to continue to be even whiter with the level of gentrification that is happening on the east side, in particular where the Ellis is situated right now. So I just want us to be, maybe that is a request from administration. Let's just really talk about what are the cons for all decisions. And I'm not saying the decision to have Nostromundo is not going to cause an impact. I'm saying, yes, it will be. Whatever decision I just want all of us to know what are the decisions. And some of my colleagues refer to what Nostromundo parents were advocating. I know, because they also called me I know that we want our own building and we want to grow our program. And that was because at that time, we did not know, we couldn't say for certain that Nostromundo would be its own building. And then at that time, we thought that the building was going to be smaller. That's why people keep saying that. The building is about the capacity of the two buildings about the same. So all I'm asking us is, and maybe we just do a report of if we move Nostromundo, here's the consequences. And we're just gonna have to live with them. If we put Nostromundo here, these are the consequences. If we have a community school, these are the consequences. I absolutely would love to have an elementary school in our community. I would love to have more bus transportation. I would love to have better access to food and nutrition. I would love to have access to better programming for children. All of those things have been missing in this community for far too long. And I would love to have all those things. So please, when you're talking about the South Side, come over here. Let's do a tour about the South Side. I had invited Dr. Jenkins to come and let's just do a tour. Let's just talk about who lives in this neighborhood, what happens in this neighborhood. I would appreciate when people were talking about the South Side, it's beyond what, just meetings, that really people just really take a drive here and see how we live. What is in our neighborhood? What is the extent of our neighborhood? so people better understand what is the decision that we're making, because no matter what the decision is, there are going to be some equitable consequences for everyone involved, and we're just going to have to figure out how to live with them.
So thank you, Ananda, for that. I mean, I think for me, what's making my decision very clear here is that we always ask our communities of color for input. And we rarely ever follow that. And in this very instance, it is very clear that our African-American community is advocating for this school. Our Latino community and families who attend Nuestro Mundo, from what I have been hearing, are advocating for Frank Alice. And it is very clear to me that the direction. And so if our African-American community was saying something else, if our DLI families were, Nuestro Mundo families were saying something else, that's different, but it is very clear. And I agree with my colleagues here on the board that this is very much aligned with what we have been hearing from our community. And I think we have to take this serious, and we cannot, we have to listen to the voices of those who are most impacted by the decisions that we make. And you're right, Ananda, this is going to have some unintended consequences. Every decision that we make as a board does that. But I think, I keep going back to what Ali says, we have opportunities and we can explore those moving forward. But this is really a decision from what I'm hearing from our Black community and our families, that this is the route that they want to go. And it was very clear from this recommendation that our staff has listened to our communities, particularly our communities of color, and have made this recommendation to us. Dr. Jenkins, did you want to say something before we move on?
Yes, and as I said in the beginning, it's very sensitive, but I think something that Ananda said is so real. And I think what Ali was saying, this is an opportunity, this is a time, even though it's very sensitive, you should be excited. And we should also make a commitment to not just making a decision, but going in our community, talking to our people, seeing who our people are, and being with them. At the end of this decision, it shouldn't be over. We should measure how we're going to continue to support our African-American community, our Latinx community. And since I've arrived in a very short time, I see that tension, a potential growing, or for this opportunity, the way that we do this, it's not what we do, it's how we do it. And if we support our families, our African-American families, our Latinx families, all of our families in the way that they should be supported, then I think we could do some repair there. I agree. There are going to be some who may come up short, but how short they come up would be dependent upon how we genuinely embrace our entire community. And we do have to go out into the community. We just can't make a decision and not know who we're impacting. So I'm going to make that commitment. Ananda had invited me to go to the South Side, so I will be going with her and taking the chiefs with me to the South Side over there.
If you ever want any visitors, I can.
Okay, so if for those who have questions, concerns, need follow-up answers, you have time to do that work before our vote in this month's regularly scheduled board meeting. So we will move on to the next item. And Jane, do you, will you continue this? Or?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Gloria. And thank you for this great discussion. I feel you guys are going to move forward on this in a really good way for our community. I think, Barb, can you put up the slides again? We just have a few more to go through. So one of the things I'd like to do is ground our conversation moving forward tonight by reminding us that in the strategic plan, we identified these 5 levers of change, And these strategies actually, we think, are going to be moving us toward our goal, empowering our school communities by providing principals and schools with the resources they need to serve our students and families, investing in people, fully supporting our staff with a focus on anti-racist, culturally responsive, rigorous instruction, and guided by powerful hiring and professional development and evaluation practices. Streamlining priorities, focusing and streamlining the work of central office. Planning for the future, thinking and planning in the long term with our students, families, and staff, and in partnership with our community. And embracing innovation, keeping a growth mindset, being bold and innovative in our solutions. So we think that all those strategies can focus our work on implementing our 3 goals. Every child on track to graduate, ready for college, career, and community. The district and every school in it as a place where children, staff, and families thrive. And then our goal of African American children and youth excelling in school and centered on Black excellence. Next slide, Barb. So with those things in mind, at this point, Ali is going to review with us the ways of working that have been developed as we work toward those goals. Ali?
Hey, thanks so much, Jane, for everything all year. And I think, you know, it's important to recognize that this body of ways of working was generated by 5 of the current board members. So Savian and Chris were not present at the retreat that we came up with these as a group. And I think talking about how these ways of working have served us, but also how we can enhance our way of working together as a board. And Dr. Jenkins, we spoke earlier today, and I think, you know, making sure that the ways that the board works also complement who you are as a leader and your role as superintendent is something we wanted to bring to this conversation. Are there other things folks wanted me to highlight or speak to? Are there questions around our ways of working? Nikki?
Yeah, just one. On the responsible use of social media, I understand the point. Just want to remind people as elected officials, we're still elected. We still have the right to post this take, and I'm as guilty as anyone on this, so I'm calling out myself as much as anyone else. At the same point, just stating that everyone should have the disclaimer. I'm telling this because Chris is new. If she has a Facebook page, I don't know. But to have the disclaimer that your ideas are not representative of MMSD or your time as a board member. They are you as an individual.
Thank you so much for speaking to that, Nikki. And that is also something we emphasized at our last board retreat when we spoke to kind of when can you speak as a board or who can speak for us as a board versus when we act individually, and, you know, how to, you know, point folks in the direction of each of us individually and not kind of speak to one another's opinions as a basis for a way of working. So thank you for bringing that to the conversation, Nikki. Did other folks have things they wanted to speak to before we move this into the retreat? Carlton?
I think that there are 2 bullets up under the collective in terms of when you're talking about modeling positive SLT and Board of Education partnership for the entire organization. That's critical as all of our children, our entire community, everyone's looking at us, and we should continue to model the expectations that we hold for everyone else as well. And then the second bullet is to facilitate the discussions with an eye toward humanity. And I say humanity meaning human decency. We should always keep that in mind, and then just watching for the late meetings, but watching for adversarial tone and interactions, because if we're keeping intent, and I think that, by the way, I think that was a great discussion we just had, and I appreciate the sincerity, and I appreciate Ananda just being open book for all of us. That was a great way to model that we can be vulnerable, and let's not think that we cannot be vulnerable. So those are the 2 I bring out.
Thank you so much for speaking to those points. Are there any other comments or questions, Gloria?
Ali, I just want to say that we will review these again at our upcoming board retreat. So we can have really further conversation so that we can bring in Savion and Chris Gomez-Schmidt to add to the conversation or anything new that they would like to add to our ways of working.
And I think there's one more slide that maybe goes with this. So Barb, you want to go to the next one?
Yeah, so process being just a breakdown of our functionality as a board. And I'm sorry, Jane, did you want to speak to this slide specifically?
Well, I just wanted to have people take a look at that and remember our, 3 board meetings that we have a month and an instructional work group, operational work group, where a member of the administration works with a board member to chair and facilitate those 2 work groups. And then we have our regular meeting once a month, where usually that's where votes are being taken. So I think that just working through that protocol kind of brings us to looking at the topics for our upcoming meetings, unless you wanted to say more about that, Ali. Or
No, I think that was a very elegant transition, Jane. Nicely done. Very smooth.
I think Jane,
Way
I
to
just
keep
want
us
to add,
moving along.
I think I just want to add that, the request of data and any information, doing it via our chief of staff, I think that has worked really well for us. Because then it really keeps us all aligned. We're getting the information and it's going through one person rather than sending information and request directly to staff. I think this really, really does work well for us.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Gloria. It works well for the administration too. So I think it's really been a good way for us to keep questions and information moving along. Okay, so next slide, please. And thank you, Ali, for lifting all that up for us. I'm going to ask Lisa and Kelly to share more about these topics that have been identified, and for those instructional work groups and for our regular board meetings, and just say again that they will be flexible, as they are, as we know, we never expected a lot of the things we needed to talk about this year would be on our agenda. But Kelly or Lisa, do you want to, I don't know if there's, I know you got in your packet the possible topics by group, and also kind of overview for the year by those groups.
So Jane, I'm happy to just start and foreshadow a little bit around the instruction work group.
Sure. Barb, you can take that down if you want to, unless you need it, Lisa.
So everyone should have the 2-pager that came out with the topics really sort of clustered in a couple of areas: the teaching and learning plans, the secondary vision, the focus on Black excellence, and then also some other policy updates and required policy revisions that come into the cycle for this coming year. And again, we tried to just give a sense of some themes that we know are coming up. I've been doing this for going on 8 years now. So just have a sense of what cycle we're in with the 3 major plans and the other work that we're doing. So again, echoing what Jane said around flexibility, knowing that there are times when things need to move and be adjusted a little bit. Ananda is my partner in this. I know you and I have been pretty good at working together on that, and I certainly appreciate it. But as you can see, if with the instruction work group, this is actually a summary on that first page around revisiting topics, either policy for a vote or discussion of district strategy related to instruction or operations. So that really is sort of the governance structure and purpose for both the instructional and the operational work group. So then as we scroll down, these were, again, just some themes that we were thinking about and knowing where we're at with some of the plans. So we're thinking about those bulleted areas around specifically teaching and learning. We always provide behavior education plan updates, As Mike Herding said, we'll bring to you information about the English Language Learner Plan. John has just finished an external evaluation for the special education plan. We owe you an advanced learning update on that, and we need to talk about when that cycle for evaluation, if it occurs, will begin. I know we are all eager to talk about 4-day full K planning, so we thought that deserved a place on the list. Ongoing updates around virtual learning, ongoing updates around the important process that we have underway for K-5 materials adoption. So all of those fall under the teaching and learning plans. Then just wanted to speak a little bit to our ongoing work around microschool and opportunity youth. Be sure that we are informing the board and getting feedback about our community school work that's happening, and also about the work that's happening specifically around Black excellence. And then again, a suite of policies that get brought forth. I know we need to talk about the Title I policy on parent engagement and the suite of other policies that Sherry will let us know need to be updated. So that is just initial thinking, and we would want to know, are there themes that we've missed, or what feedback might you have about additional items that you'd like to see us talk about?
Gloria, do you want me to do operations, or do you want to pause and get comments on instruction before I move to ops?
Let's pause and just get feedback on instruction. I specifically just want to add virtual learning on here. I mean, it's obvious, right? But I think that really placing this on here would be helpful. And I think, I think
on the regular board or the instructional?
Instruction.
So
Okay, yeah.
the virtual learning is going to happen in every instruction work group, similar to what happened last time, Gloria. That's kind of how we set it up.
That's perfect. And I'm so glad you're setting that up, Ananda, to do that. But is virtual learning on there?
Yeah, yeah.
It is.
It's one of the highlighted bullets.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. Okay.
It's
All
okay.
right.
I have one to remove.
Anybody else? Nikki?
I have one to remove. Since we are having sports at least the first semester, I really don't think we need the interscholastic athletic code necessarily changed when we don't have athletics currently, especially since after COVID, I don't know what the rules are going to be for the WIAA, and that may change significantly. So we may write a policy and then have to write it again. Policy 3160.
Yep, I think we can move that.
Got it. Thanks,
Pick
Nikki.
it up when we need to.
Because since we're not having at least a fall season,
Right.
it would make a lot of sense. Also, want to talk more besides opportunity youth, special education in advanced placement and dual exceptionality, if we could ever fit that in, because oftentimes that's not always in there.
Okay.
Got it.
And I like the handbook input, but otherwise that's good.
Thank you.
Did I see Chris Carusi's name up or hand up?
Sorry, I had to get to my unmute button. First of all, I want to just do a clarification of the process. Right now, we're going through instruction work group. Will we have, I assume we'll have time for operations work group. Will we also have time to comment on agenda items for regular board meetings and retreats? Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So in terms of instructional content, as I said earlier, I would like for us to have a conversation about assessment strategy. Basically where we're headed with formative assessment, where we're headed with standardized assessment, and where we're headed with high school grading. I would like to expand on the curriculum materials conversation and really hone in on improving reading outcomes through curricular adoption, through professional development, and any other strategies that we want to bring to the table. I know this is one of Dr. Jenkins's priorities, and I'm really excited to dive into it. So I think we should call it out explicitly in the agenda list. Let's see. I think that's all I had for instruction. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Christina, did I see your name up, your hand up?
Yes, you did. Thank you, Gloria. I'm not sure if this fits necessarily under instruction, but I've watched the development of these organizing topics for the years of the board work for a few years now. And one of the things I have sort of reflected on is that it seems like there's bits and pieces of things that are all very, very important, but we seem to be missing some of the larger umbrella things and plans that these all fit in under. So in addition to the strategic framework, you know, our ESSA plan, Every Student Succeeds Act plan, that really brings together how we are providing, how we are monitoring student progress and meeting academic standards. It has information on staffing, effective staffing and supporting teachers. It has information on parent and family engagement, use of discipline practices, professional development, data, consultation, high school, the post-secondary transition. So a lot, you know, English language learners has a lot of information there and sort of hits all of these points. And so I'm not sure if it fits under instruction work group, but I think we should really take a look at our ESSA plan, because I don't think that has been discussed at the board level before. And kind of in the same vein, for looking under that secondary vision, academic and career planning. It's really a big focus in our middle schools and high schools that really describes how we are helping students reach that graduate vision and really develop a plan for themselves as they move from 6th through 12th grade in our system. And so somewhere discussing academic career planning under that secondary vision, I think is important, getting an update on that. I also think the comprehensive assessment system is important, like we talked about. And I will just say, last thing for instruction is just in addition to the curriculum materials around reading, again, adding in that PD process and what that's going to involve would be great.
Okay, Ananda?
Yeah, so the ESSA plan is pretty robust. Is there a particular part of the ESSA plan, Chris, that you're looking to talk about?
I think we need to discuss how it fits in sort of with everything that we're doing, the strategic framework, you know, the different pieces of it. I was reviewing it today. The one that we have online is our 2018-19 plan. I don't know if it's been updated for this year, but I just think as a board, we need to take a closer look at this overall structure of what ESSA and the accountability that it provides. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how we can talk about the ESSA plan in a reasonable amount of time in 1 hour or 2 hours meeting. So I don't know, Lisa, do you have recommendations of how we would part the ESSA plan to overlay?
And Ananda, can you and Lisa talk about how you
Yeah,
can incorporate?
we can do that. Thank you.
Ali?
Yeah, I want to thank Chris Carusi for talking about testing and assessment as part of instruction. I think that it's a conversation we could have in a far more expansive and informative way that would greatly serve our community. I completely agree with that and second the idea of talking about that in this work, in instruction work group. I think it's really important that we emphasize the arts. It's not something we've historically done. And I think really talking about what we're offering in terms of exploration of the arts and academic achievement within the arts is tremendously relevant to our ability to navigate providing those opportunities to students and to expand things that are working well for our kiddos, and also to understand what happens when kids are involved in the arts, and particularly the arts that we as a district are offering. So I'd like to see us add that conversation. I think we were able to have a very beautiful conversation last year around human growth and development and consent. I think this is a conversation we need to continue to have. I think our young people contributed so much to that conversation, and we're so passionate about that conversation in terms of menstrual equality, in terms of making sure that you have developmentally appropriate LGBTQ inclusive human growth and development from early childhood throughout your education. So I would love to see us continue that conversation and have an expansive conversation around that area. I'd like the BEP update to be BEP/disproportionality in data, disproportionality in a discipline conversation. So I think being able to really have that conversation in a way that is flushed out and acknowledges inequity within discipline is relevant to our ability to progress as a district as well. And then I think emphasizing elementary education. I've said this before, I'll say it again. We create the achievement gap in elementary school and we address it in high school. We have to start looking at how we are not creating the gap in the first place. And I think that requires a sincere conversation about what learning looks like for our K through 5 kiddos, or our 4K through 5 kiddos. That's it for me. Thanks, y'all.
Great, thank you. Savion?
Yeah, I just want to echo Chris's point. I'd love to see think about grading and assessments in here and how we can make those align across grade level, elementary, middle, and high school. I am really happy to see full K 4-day planning. I think this is a transformative opportunity for our community. The earlier we can get started on that. And then finally, I don't know if it would maybe fall under, well, two more. I don't know if it would fall under BEP, but maybe a behavioral health in schools update, particularly during COVID, concern with the mental well-being of our students and families. And then on the micro school / opportunity youth bullet point, would really like to hone in on how we can expand our opportunity youth programming to include middle school and elementary school students, as well. As Elise said, there are ways that we do create the achievement gap, and I think with the opportunity youth programming, being able to identify students who may be struggling, if we can extend that, the earlier the better. And that's all I got.
Okay, looks like we got everybody. Am I missing anybody?
One thing.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing?
Julia, and then we'll finish off with you, Nikki.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Savion said. I think specifically with virtual learning, I'd love for people to have a conversation about what student mental health is going to look like through that. And just while we're not having in-person school, a lot of students are missing their friends, their mental health supports. And I think there are ways for teachers to incorporate that into their teaching that definitely could be benefited with a conversation. So thanks.
Okay,
seeing Julia reminded me of one. I want to talk more about student voice and including students more in our decision-making process, instead of just focus groups, but actual working with students on plans. And the other one that I really would like to discuss on, now what was it again? Oh yeah, the K through 5 reading materials. I think the board should, besides just voting on the literacy materials, I'm not saying I'm a literacy expert, but I would like to at least see the curriculum.
Great, thank you, Nikki. And then I'll just finish off by back to virtual learning. I mean, I'm glad that we're going to incorporate that in every instruction work group. And what I would like to see is in virtual learning aspect, or a focus on if it's relevant, right, in each topic, particularly around micro school and opportunity youth, and how we are tackling
virtual learning in that area to help support our opportunity youth and micro school. So okay. Next, operations.
All right, so Chair, Chris is our operations work group chair, so we will work through this with Chris. But ultimately what we're looking for this year is a very tight strategy around operation work group, and that is not unintentional. As you all know, our 2021 budget would typically be just about done by now, with minor moving parts in October, and that's not where we're at this point. So we still have a good amount of work to do on the 2021 budget that will get done by the end of October. And then we'll start up right away in November and into December with a 21-22 budget. So kind of contrary to other years, we will be pretty much doing the budget every month moving forward, and won't have the same kind of breaks in the budget process that we're used to. So that for that purpose, I ask that we keep the operations work group really tight this year. We will work on touch base on the referendum between now and the vote, make sure the board's getting what you need in your work for the referendum and on the public information campaign. So that work will continue through November. And then once we get out of the referendum stage and we know if it's passed, we will then move into the implementation of the referendum, which ultimately starts to look like A, passing the bond so we can start to borrow our money, but B, more importantly, the community input and feedback that'll take place around both the facilities work ahead. We'll have community groups attached to each one of those facility projects. And of course, the budget that we always have the community feedback phases around our budget implementation. So all of those like updates and input coming out of our community groups will be filtered in through the operations work group. We always bring back to you the employee handbook conversation. Those dates do change depending on how negotiations process itself goes, and they do sometimes take more than one meeting. So we'll make sure we save space for that as well. Maybe unusual to other years, we don't have a long list of operations policies this year, or this coming year. We did a few this year and quite a few the year before. So if something comes up, we will obviously bring in operations policies for you. But at this point, there's nothing urgent coming up that we feel like we have to do this year. In the special meetings where it says required voting topics, those items largely fall under me, so I'll flag them now. Chris Carusi is your TID representative on the Joint Review Board. So Chris and I will bring forward TIDs as the city needs a vote, and you need to weigh in to tell Chris how to vote. We do WASB resolutions once a year, and then HR will come to the table when it comes to our contract staffing notices, and that happens just once a year. So that's what's currently on the docket for operations.
Great. Okay, any other?
Okay, I will just add a little bit to special meetings, and then we can go, I don't know, Gloria, if you want to talk about operations and then go to regular, but special meetings also include any employee and student discussions that are in closed session, staff and student recognition ceremonies, it may be other handbook input that needs to happen, and then ethics and confidentiality and social media use, any of those things that we might have to address specially in a special meeting. Also the retreats, you can see that there are 3 things there for this year, and there could be more, but long range facility plan, board development and reflection, and the superintendent onboarding. So did you want to stop there, Gloria, and take comments?
Yeah. I just want to add, I'm not sure where this goes, is our safety and security plan. Would that be under special meetings?
Correct, that would be special meetings.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there may be some things coming back to the regular board meeting on that.
Yep, right. If we could just add under special meeting, safety and security.
Okay.
Anything else from the board on operations, board retreat, special meetings before we move on?
I do.
Nikki?
On the employee handbook, is that under the vote category in operations? Or is that under the special meetings? I was confused because it could be both. Did we put it under both? Yes, wasn't sure on that.
It could be both.
It could be both. It kind of always depends on how the timeline plays out for us. So we can't quite predict in the future, but at a minimum, it's on the operations work group and it would be voted on, Nikki.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure on the voted on part. And on the other thing, the special education plan that we don't vote on, community schools we don't vote on, but we now do vote on resolutions, correct?
Yes, you vote on the WASB resolutions.
WASB, yes.
And regular resolutions now under our new plan, correct?
Yeah.
Because
yes, we do vote on resolutions.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Is that like a resolution that a board member would bring forward?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a meeting on that, didn't we? And
Yeah, we rewrote that, the process.
Okay.
And do you recall?
Sherry, do you have anything to say with that one? I'll give her a minute. I don't know where she is. Here you are.
Hi, Jane. It wasn't where I was, it was where my cursor was. So we did vote on, the board did discuss the resolution process moving forward and came up with sort of guidelines on how that's going to work. And I believe it was distributed to all the board members.
Okay. So that is something that happened this year. So thank you for bringing
Yes.
that up, Nikki. And just another comment on the handbook. You will recall that that doesn't have to be voted on all the time, but at least every 2 years at this point. At least
I
once
would
every
like it on the annual if we could, though, if we have time.
Well, I think we have annual discussions on it.
We have annual discussions and there's a board policy that governs that particular work.
I just have a problem if we're going to change a handbook without a vote.
Oh, we wouldn't do that.
Nikki, we wouldn't do that, Nikki.
I think we changed that policy anyway, so yeah.
Did we? That's all I want to make sure of.
Okay. Anybody else? I can't see everybody's hands, so Chris and Christina Gomes-Schmidt.
Thank you, Gloria. So Kelly, I appreciate your comments about keeping operations work group agenda tight because the budget is going to be all consuming this year. However, I would add to that it is important for us to have our operational discussions at public meetings, and I think there are other topics we need to talk about. I think one that I've wanted to talk about for a while and we haven't been able to get on the agenda is enrollment. The enrollment report usually comes out in November or December, and I would actually like to go back to having a public conversation about that report, particularly because COVID may have impacts on our enrollment that we actually need to grapple with as a board. So I would like to get that on the agenda. Like the instruction work group, I would like to have at least a monthly check-in on COVID operations on the operations work group agenda, even if it's just a quick update on where we're at with federal funding or where we're at with facilities and it all depends on if we're going back into buildings or not. But if we are going back into buildings, I think that needs to be on the agenda. So just keeping some space on operations work group agenda, at least for a check-in about what's going on with operations and COVID. I appreciate the handbook discussion under HR. I would also like to add a conversation just about staffing, particularly in the context of COVID and the budget constraints that it has placed on us. We've got a hiring freeze in place right now that is going to impact our staffing. And I think we need to be thinking beyond COVID to what that means for us as a district if we're not necessarily, if things are changing in terms of our staffing, we need to talk about that as a board in public. In terms of other parts of the board agenda, when we talk about the strategic framework, and I'm really glad to see that on the agenda, I think we actually need to talk about how we're measuring our goals in the, under the lens of COVID, the metrics we've set out for ourselves don't necessarily work as well as they used to. Like we looked at MAP test scores and we're not doing the MAP test because it doesn't work well virtually. We were looking at power questions, a lot of which were about like, how safe do you feel in our buildings? And we're not in our buildings. So I think we actually need to do some thought about, first of all, looking in the past, how have we done? We haven't really sat down as a board and assessed our progress towards our strategic plan goals yet. And also, do we need to rethink those metrics that we're using to evaluate our progress on these really important goals and strategies that we've set for ourselves? And finally, I think we need to think about, in terms of ways of working, possibly having the board take more direct leadership, or maybe I should say more consistent leadership throughout the year in setting our agenda. The way we work right now is we really just sort of brainstorm topics at one meeting a year. And I know there's other boards in the area that like actually have an agenda setting meeting every month. I don't think we necessarily want to do that, but setting an agenda at a public meeting is the best way to do it because it's in compliance with public meeting law. I would actually like to see us maybe at every board retreat revisit the agenda, talk about priorities, talk about new things that have come up as a board, as a whole group, so that we're kind of sharing that leadership more and working more in partnership with administration to make sure that the things that we want to talk about as board members, we have a conversation about prioritizing them and make sure they get onto agendas, especially given how unsettled everything is right now. Like our agendas are going to change constantly. That's all I have. Thank you for bringing up the safety and security, Gloria. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And then I'll just respond to that last part about planning meeting agendas. I think the way we have it set up right now, and I'm willing to like really explore how that works, is the vice president, or is the president and the vice president that meets on a regular to set these agenda items. And I think we do that for a number of reasons, right? Because you are all busy. And so to add another meeting, I'm open to, and will really definitely relieve the time for me and the VP, who have to spend a lot of time working with administration on setting the agenda. And we can talk about maybe at a future board retreat on reevaluating that process. But that we do have a process about setting these agendas. And that's why it's so important for us to have these conversations right now about, getting input on what you want to see on future agenda items. And then Ali and I work with the administration on getting those set. But definitely welcome other options. We could find it that something else will work better. But we can explore that at a future meeting. Ali?
Thank you so much for your comments, Gloria and Chris. There are two areas that I want to see us address during operations. So I would really like to see us talk about expulsion and suspension within operations and the policies that we use to navigate expulsion and suspension, but particularly the cost of expulsion and the investment, and whether or not we can look at it critically in different ways. The other thing I think would be very, very helpful in operations would be to look at partnerships more generally. So not isolating or highlighting any partnership, but just saying like, these are our partnerships. This is who we're working with, and this is what that looks like. And the board should be well aware and oriented to those partnerships. And so should our community, because I think we don't usually get kind of the full suite of partnerships. And so I think a brief high level overview of that would be really helpful in operations. Culture, climate, and educator morale are things I would like to see us speak to in operations as well. And that's it. And I do defer to Chris and Kelly. I know that this is going to be a really busy year. And so if those three suggestions don't fit into the flow of kind of the very immediate things that we really have to focus on, I completely understand. But those are my thoughts in terms of things I think would benefit our conversation.
Thank you, Ali. And then I just want to add to sort of my comments. I think that's why, in response to Chris's sort of setting the agenda in open meetings, I think that's so important. And, I think that's what we're doing here. And I think it is the responsibility of the operations chair and the instruction chair to work with administration also on ensuring that what we're talking about today and really planning for the year is to get those items on the agenda and work through that. And so it is really, the process is the instruction work group chair, the operations work group chair, and Ali and I work on regularly scheduled board meeting agendas to work through some of that. So, but like I said, I mean, at a future board retreat, we can, Chris, explore if you want to come in and bring in some recommendations on how we make this process more transparent. I would be open to that. Anybody else? Dr. Jenkins?
Yes, one of the things I would like for us to start thinking about too in this, during these unprecedented times, is an opportunity for us to hone in on our most vulnerable students. And I don't know if I've heard a lot of conversation about that in terms of being intentional. And I did hear, and I appreciate individuals mentioning the reading and also the socio-emotional piece of our students and of our staff. But when we're talking about during this time, we have a number, it was known that in traditional settings, we have a group of students, Black and Brown students, lower socioeconomic students who are not faring well, but during this time of online learning, we have to be more intentional in engaging that particular group of students and to have it in operations where we're regularly reporting out what's going on. Are we making contact 100% with those students who are even most vulnerable? Because during this time, they fall even further behind. And so the changing, and I appreciate that too, Ali, when you talk about expulsions at this time of suspensions. Last year wound up being probably the lowest level of suspensions for any school in the nation because we left out in March. But now that we're online, the more important thing I think I see now, how do we engage students in learning that we don't have those interactions that's causing them to be out for a suspension or whatever. So I would just like to put that out to be very intentional. And it plays right into also our goal 3 when we talk about with our Black youth and children are going to excel. Right now, when we look at our data, we know that that's way low, the disparities. So we can be very intentional right now and not just with, and I love what Chris said, it's not just about the standardized test. So our conversation about instruction and assessment, and when we're doing that, how are we disaggregating that data to really show that our students are being exposed to great level of expectation and that they're progressing, in particular when we're looking into not only just the Black students, but the ELL students and our special ed students. This is a great time for us to progress during this online time.
You're muted, Gloria.
Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. All right, any other? Okay, let's move on to
Lisa, there's Chris Gomez-Schmidt.
Okay.
Just a quick, I just wanted to, I also had on my list, similar to what Chris said about in this time of COVID and a pandemic, having a mirror side operations update going on in the instructional work group, whether that comes from Karen Kepler or whoever is in charge of the operations side. So the staffing coordination, the building management, and also the public health aspect of this. And how that plays into the decisions that we're making. And also, I guess, the communication to staff and families and how that all fits together. And that feels like an operations discussion. It may be larger than that, if we need to put in a special meeting for that or something, but some kind of update on that I think would be helpful during operations.
Yeah, thank you, Christina, for that. You've mentioned that before. I think it's so important for us moving forward in each of these areas. Anytime there's an opportunity to provide communication information to our community around virtual learning and how we're doing it, is we should incorporate that in every conversation that we have and share as much information that we can to the community so that they know that we are on it, we're working on it, So really, it fits in everything that we're doing right now, you know? I think that would be helpful for the board.
Right. And I think maybe one comment that also fits in with what Ali was saying about partnerships. Partnerships are going to be really key for us in meeting student needs over the next year. We are really going to need to partner with our community and really strengthen those relationships to meet student needs. So if that fits in there too, that might be something to look at.
Great. Okay. All right. So move on to the regular board meeting.
Gloria, you have Savion raising his hand yet?
Okay. You guys must raise your hand as soon as I go to my other screen. Savion?
I think our laptops have the split screen feature, but anyway, so
Well, maybe you young and like teach me that. I have no idea how to do that.
So maybe this will be split between operations and instruction, but I am curious on the scenario planning that we will have for potential hybrid in-person, particularly if we do outside classrooms, play-based learning, project-based learning, and just some of those aspects of the scenario planning. And to Ali and Christina's point about partnerships, they will be key. I know, for example, the church that Pastor Allen is at, they have a 3rd and 4th grade program in the summer for students to get some enrichment where they're learning outside. So I just think those are ideas we can learn from and potentially partner with.
Great. Thank you, Savion. All right. Next, regular board meeting.
Yeah, so most of the things that we have on the regular board meeting have come through either instructional work group, operations work group, or a special board meeting. So hopefully you will have had a chance to talk about everything before it gets to the regular board meeting. The superintendent usually has a presentation. The board president has a presentation. So there are 2 spots to sort of do some special updates on that regular board meeting. And then you can see the required voting topics there that we have every year. Some of those are the plans that Lisa was referring to. And then other updates. I think we've talked about the strategic framework, wanting to update metrics and measures on that. We are looking at a different way to present the annual end of the year report, as we don't have the same measures. I think somebody mentioned that. So there will be some kind of follow-up report on our virtual learning aspects, and we're still working on, we've gathered information from all of our stakeholders, and we're just working on how we would present that. But that is usually something that happens at the regular board meeting. And then audit reports. There are things that Kelly needs to bring up annually, just in terms of keeping the budget moving along. And any questions about that? Okay, I see none. All right.
Gloria,
All right.
I tried to raise my hand really fast.
Okay, Ananda.
I just said that I really appreciate the entire team putting this together. And thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins, for already coming in with like a really good template for us. And thanks, Jane, for giving us a good template for us to build upon. I think I'm really appreciative of all my colleagues giving a lot of inputs. I think my only comment is in regards to more scheduling. I know this last year it was a huge toll because we hired 2 superintendents. I don't know if anybody caught that. Actually, 3 superintendents. So I would appreciate that the meetings, if it's special meetings, to be scheduled on the Mondays that we don't have meetings. And then the board retreats to be scheduled like to the extent possible way in advance, so we can kind of plan around things in particular. Yeah, just like those things. We all are trying to do a lot, and I understand that, but I really appreciate that. The only other item that I would bring it up is that I am certain that there are going to be a lot of things that that we don't know at this point that are going to come up. We're going to be coming to a very weird year in every aspect of the word weird, and trying to figure out how we can have somewhat of a flexibility in all the times that we meet to be able to build in some additional things in order for us to, at the very least, have some discussion. I was kind of pushing back a little bit, and Christina, on your comment about the asset plan, is that I really started having this conversation with Lisa about how do we get a little bit of flexibility to bring things into the instruction work group, for example, that we won't know that is going to come up. And then now we want to talk about it and there's no time because we build so much into the entire year. So just kind of be mindful of how do we build some time, some flexible time so we can build things as they go, or can spend a little bit more time on things that we needed to address right away. I know Callie has been amazing in bringing us critical things that we needed to vote right away, last minute. And so I appreciate the entire team being really nimble and flexible as we had to address things. But I'm just being cautious too, as we're planning a very robust year, knowing that there'll be so many things that are going to come last minute, and just wanting to, all the things that everybody said are really, really important, and we'll have timely things coming up, I'm pretty sure, every month going forward. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Ananda, for really elevating that. I think that it is going to be an abnormal year, and we're going to have to adjust. Unfortunately, it is what it is, and I think we're going to have to be very flexible in our direction, and continue to move, with intentionality and focus around virtual learning. That will be a lot of our work, moving forward. And so, I appreciate you, Ananda, elevating that and reminding us, right? And I think it is a worthwhile conversation for us to have at our board retreat. I think we have to, I hear you. These are all great things, that we've talked about today. In any normal year, we would be able to continue this way. But I think at our board retreat, it'll be worthwhile for us to go through this again and really be realistic and strategize around what our priorities are in this kind of year that we're going to be approaching. And so thank you again, Ananda.
Yeah, no, thank you, Gloria, for saying that. And I think that what ended up happening is that folks thinking that there was trying to stack a lot of things on meetings that are already, and I know specifically the end of this year, Lisa and I had to make some decisions about moving things around because there's so many things happening, right, Lisa? I know you're putting a camera on. So figuring out how to put some buffer for us to address things we're not expecting at this point.
All right, great, thank you. Chris Carusi?
Thanks. In the regular board meeting agenda, I noticed we have a conversation about pathways, which is good. I assume we're going to talk about both, what's happened in the past few school years, as well as how we're adapting pathways to the virtual environment. Likewise, I would really like to talk about AVID and how we're utilizing AVID in the virtual environment. It's such an important program. I want to make sure that doesn't slip through the cracks as we go through this uncertainty.
Thank you, Chris. So we will take all these wonderful ideas, and Lisa and Kelly will do some more shaping of this information so that you guys will have it for your retreat. And I think that those are great ideas about taking a look and being realistic and setting some priorities. And it's great to get all these ideas out here. And who knows, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about all of them this year. Maybe you guys will. Hope so. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jane. All right, next item is Falk Elementary School Renaming Committee. This is the second one we've done. It's really exciting that our community are leading this effort in renaming our schools, particularly around, you know, after some really phenomenal women in our community. And so we can go ahead. So I also want to thank Ananda, particularly for getting all those names to us. And, you know, I think her Facebook social media post really helped us in getting some great people on this list, and other board members who sent in names. And so, and unfortunately, I was actually concerned that we weren't going to get 12. And that I was going to be running around at the last minute trying to find 12 people, but we got more than 12. And so at the end of the, you know, midday today, I had to eliminate some people, which is so unfortunate. And I think we do really have to evaluate this policy at a different time when we get some breathing room. I think we should really just take a look at this policy and be flexible on how many people can serve on this committee. But our policy does say 12. And so if you look at the list of people, you know, we have a great list. And in our board docs, there's the list and there is the timeline.
So I think we need to vote on the committee and the chairperson, Gloria.
Yep. And so if you look at the list of the renaming committee, I did assign Yolanda Shelton Morris, who has agreed to chair the committee. And so I will go ahead and read the motion. I move that the Board of Education establish a 12-person committee for the purpose of renaming Falk Elementary School and designating Yolanda Shelton Morris as the chairperson, as set forth in the documents prepared for the special meeting of the Board of Education dated August 10th, 2020. Can I get a second?
Second, Ali.
Ali, second. Okay. Discussion?
Gloria, because I know there is at least one person that kind of signed up at the last minute. So at this point, are we closing this list?
Oh, somebody signed up at the last minute. Yeah, these are the 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know we had some great people on here. Anybody else? Discussion? Nikki?
My contact never got back to me, so.
Okay, thank you. All right, okay. Christina?
Can I just ask a process question? How does this committee, does it continue to interact with the school committee that brought the proposal forward? Do those interact at all during this process?
So they can, and they did in the last time. I mean, they came to the meetings and they had things to share, and some of the people will be people who were on the original group. And, you know, I think ideally moving forward, hopefully that is where you get many of the committee members, but they are definitely, these are open meetings. We're in the response period right now. People can come and be a part of those meetings.
Great, thank you.
And then from my understanding, Dr. Jenkins will work with this committee to move it forward, and then it'll come back to us.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, Julia, Ananda?
Sorry, I was a little confused. I thought when I sent those names that you didn't have any names, but now I'm seeing that then some of the names I sent are not in here.
Yeah, no, that's, it's not true. We did get names at the same time, that you were giving me names.
So how did the selection of those names happen?
So by policy, the board president selects. Board members
So-
nominate and the board president selects.
I was trying to be fair on board members who did submit names. You really just try to like spread them out. And so you gave me a really long list of names. And so,
Well, I'm just trying to see out of those folks who are parents. And right now, all I can see that parents is Erica. There's maybe a few, just a few parents in here.
there is 1, 2, and I'm not sure of who the list that you sent me were parents.
Yeah.
Do you know, Ananda?
I know out of the list that like I tried to prioritize the same, like parents or people that live in a neighborhood. So I see Erica is a parent. I think
So
Cara is a parent, but those are the only names that I mean, I know who is not a parent.
Claire is a parent, so that's 3 parents.
Who
Claire.
Okay.
Claire, yeah. I believe I believe Claire has had students in the school or currently does.
And isn't Sarah a parent and a staff member?
Yes, Sarah is so that would make 4.
I think
And
it does
the
need
rest-
the balance of the community as well as parents.
The rest are African American
leaders. Yeah,
they're all African American leaders. Richard Scott, Theola, yeah, Gloria Latson Billings. I mean, we got a really good list. So I really tried to get, although Ananda, you did send me a really good list, I did not include all of them on that list.
Okay.
Okay, Julia, your advisory vote?
Aye.
Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Your hands up. Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion passes 7-0. All right, I think that is the last
Thank you.
agenda. I'm
Yes,
sorry?
thank you. Yep, thank you.
Yep. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Before we adjourn, I just want to give a quick happy birthday to Sabian Castro, because it is his birthday today, and happy birthday to our president Gloria Reyes, because her birthday is tomorrow. And welcome, Carlton Jenkins. You made it through your first 4 hours and 10 minutes of board meetings. So
It was
welcome.
awesome.
Congratulations,
Happy
everyone.
birthday, y'all. You're the best.
Yes, happy birthday to you guys. Great meeting. Thank you.
Happy
Thank
birthday.
you. So
Alright.
all those, okay, I guess all those in favor?
Aye.
So
All right,
moved.
we are- Okay, thank you.
Good night, y'all.
Good night,
Good night.
everybody.